They pause it. Did we not just see a book that looks just like that still inside of his apartment? Get everybody out now. Get them out now and call the bomb squad. We would like to thank today's sponsors who have made it possible for Rotten Mango to support the National Network to End Domestic Violence, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a social, political, and economic environment in which partner-related workplace and stalking violence no longer exist. They provide legal resources and support for things like restraining orders and much more. This episode's partnerships have also made it possible to support Rotten Mango's growing team, and we would like to thank you guys for your continued support as we work on our mission to be worthy advocates. As always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. Now, before we get started, a few quick disclaimers. There are a lot of heavy topics in today's episode, references to hate speech, racism, violent stalking, and self-exit. Additionally, the perpetrator in this case states that he has a genetic disorder as well as struggles with his mental health. Obviously, it shouldn't need to be said, but just in case, these are unrelated diagnoses, and anyone with similar disorders or mental health struggles is not inherently violent, nor does this particular case represent communities as a whole. So with that being said, let's get into it. First of the 20 tapes, which we will refer to as the video diaries. 20 separate tapes, 20 hours long video diaries. It starts on Ricardo Lopez's 21st birthday. His present to himself is this: the camera to document his life, his art, and most importantly, his big plans. He looks at the camera. Do you want to see something funny? I'm going to show you who I am. And he pinches his cheeks. So his thumbs are at the edges of his mouth, and he pinches his upper cheeks to make like a very scary smiley face. And he gets closer to the camera and closer. I am a monster. Can you see me smiling at you? Comfort is what I seek in speaking to you. Something with I don't know, something that makes me feel better. For a long time, I've been speaking into a mirror and being my own psychologist or whatever.
I am a monster. Can you see me smiling at you?
He said that he plans on documenting his plans to send his favorite celebrity an HIV bomb because she deserves to die. So he's gonna find a sex worker that has AIDS, pay for her blood. Obviously, he's not gonna sleep with her. He states that. Then inject the blood into hypodermic needles, send her a package looking like it's from a PR firm from New York City that's inviting her to an AIDS gala. That's perfect. In research for funding for AIDS, she's gonna open up the invitation and boom, straight into her thumbs, 2 needles will inject her with HIV AIDS blood. He states, I really like this AIDS thing. It's sort of poetic. Technically, if you really want to get into it, it's much easier than having to go fly over. over there and stalk her or shoot her or stab her. He said he would make the package seem like a formal invitation. He pretends to have his thumbs poked at one point and he starts screaming bloody murder because that's his master plan. This way, she can't not think about him. He will be the biggest part of her life. He will be the one person in her life that she'll never stop thinking about. She'll never forget him.
God. Those two hypodermic needles are going to poke her thumbs, thus introducing into her bloodstream HIV contaminated blood.
So for the next 20 hours, that's over the span of 9 months. So he's not vlogging like 20 hours straight. He will start documenting his own mental collapse until he finally successfully mails a bomb to London. 9 months later, Ricardo Lopez would be dead. 20 hours of footage would be taped that shows his mind completely breaking apart, and he just gets further and further from reality. And a bomb will be sitting in a South London post office, getting ready to be delivered to a famous celebrity's residence. Just sitting there, rattling, bubbling, waiting to be opened. If you were to open the cardboard box, you would see a book in there, a book. And once you open that, everything would go to John, the maintenance man at the apartment building in Florida. He has had multiple calls about the same thing, which feels abnormal. It's September 16th, but it's still a little hot in Florida. But there's no reason for anything to be stinking up the entire place. Sometimes during the summer, you get trash left out. You mix it with the heat, the humidity of Florida. Yeah, it starts having a pungent smell that feels like it's piercing through your brain. But right now, it's fall, it's September. He makes his way over to the apartment building. And yeah, okay, it does kind of smell rancid. He had a few tasks that he wanted to do prior to all of this, but the smell is so intoxicatingly horrendous, he feels like he's going to pass out. He starts investigating, which is basically just him walking around, pausing, aggressively sniffing, and then walking around, pausing, and aggressively sniffing. And he's trying to figure out if the smell gets stronger or weaker in certain areas. Right here is the most pungent scent. He looks up and he sees the door leading directly into apartment A. He scrambles to get the keys out. He knocks on the door. Maintenance. So the maintenance staff, they're allowed to come in without prior approval in this building to fix emergency issues, which in this case, it seems like it's an emergency issue. Everybody's been complaining about this. He opens the door and nobody's home, or at least nobody's responding. The smell just keeps getting stronger as he walks in. The entire apartment is trashed. It's disgusting. It's filthy, but not gross enough to cause a scent like this. He steps over random pizza boxes on the ground. He sees this this is a tiny, tiny, cramped little apartment. And what takes up most of the space is this sculpture of a woman's face made out of clay. It's probably the size of my upper torso.
It's like a paper mache type of face, or?
Clay, I would say.
Clay.
Yes, and it looks professionally done. Like whoever is doing this, it doesn't look like something I would do. It looks well. It looks good. It resembles a person.
You can tell this is someone.
Yes. And if you're familiar with specific people, you might even be able to tell who this is. It's that specific in detail. It's just very strange. The maintenance man looks down, and there in the middle of the apartment, laying on the ground, dead, is a man's fully nude body. He looks not human. He looks like a monster. His body had already started decomposing in the Florida heat, so his body is different blotches of different colors. His face is painted red and green. His head is completely shaved. His eyebrows are shaved. It looks like he put on a Halloween mask, but only on the front of his face, but it's clearly not a mask. And he's dead. Did he paint his own face before passing, or did somebody else paint his face? But why? There's a giant pool of blood underneath him. John turns on his heels. He walks right out of that apartment. He immediately calls the police. Authorities rush in. They survey the scene, and it's confusing because was this man kidnapped? Is this a terrorist organization? Because remember on the wall it said it's a terrorist crime, a terrorist matter. This is for the FBI. On the fridge, the words N-word lover are painted, and there's one last weird note left behind. On a canvas, like an art canvas that you would get at the store, situated directly behind the dead body, are the words, the best of me. The best of me. The authorities are so confused until one of them points out the man died from a gunshot wound to the head. It appears that the way he slumped over, he would have been sitting right in front with his head in front, directly in front of that canvas. Meaning, it seems like the intention being, given the placement, that his brain matter was supposed to splatter onto the canvas, and that would be the best of him. At the same time, other officers continue watching the tapes. I mean, they're already putting the tapes in and watching them because time is of the essence. They see the dead man, Ricardo, before his passing, taking the bomb and going to the post office and shipping it successfully. He ships it all the way to England, London, where the singer has a home.
I better hurry up and go now. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna go now. It's not.
They rushed to call Scotland Yard, which is the FBI of England. The package had already arrived in a small post office in South London, and it was about to be dispatched and delivered to the singer's address. But they caught it. Do you know the best way to defuse a bomb, if you can?
Throw it into the water.
It's to make it explode.
Oh.
It's a controlled explosion. Either the bomb squad will evacuate the area and detonate the bomb, or if possible, the best case scenario would be to get the bomb, place it in a vessel or a robot that can handle the size of explosion that they're expecting from this size bomb, have it safely transported to a remote location, have it detonated in a controlled environment. Usually the bomb is placed under a reinforced chamber or it's buried deep into the ground. Sometimes the bomb squad will add additional explosives inside to make sure that the device is completely destroyed and no longer active after detonating. That is what the Scotland Yard do to this bomb, the one that was addressed to the globally known famous singer. But now that the bomb is detonated, the singer is safe and secure. She never got the bomb. There's a few lingering questions. Why did this man from Florida send an Icelandic musician living in London a bomb? Like, it's so random. There's no connection. They don't know each other other than maybe he listens to her music. And why is he dead now? I mean, what was his plan? But it's crazy that it went through customs. That is kind of crazy.
But is it because it's a very different bomb? Like it has, he's made it like needles and all that.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an explosive type of bomb. Yeah. Now, the dead man's name is Ricardo Lopez, but a lot of people that know him, they just call him the Bug Man. He's an exterminator. That is his occupation. And he works for his older brother, George, who owns this pest control company in Florida, which, you know, Ricardo is not very happy about. If you told Ricardo, when you drop out of high school at 16 years old to pursue art, you're going to end up being the Bug Man, he probably would not have believed you. Because that's crazy.
What type of art?
He did a lot of drawings, pastels, watercolors. I mean, he does seem to be skilled at art. He seems to have a talent, yeah.
Oh, the statue was made by him?
The sculpture is made by him. Now he's 21 and just exterminating cockroaches and flies on a daily basis. He would have these little outbursts on the job, and this is why his brother would constantly keep an eye on him. It's always been a thing in the family that Ricardo isn't the most mentally stable. You know, he's a little unhinged, but they try to be understanding. He would have these outbursts. I'm an exterminator, a bug man, as many people would choose to refer to me, you know, cockroach man. But most people in this world, I'd say the majority are cockroaches, me being one of them. If you look around you. I'm a piece of shit, eh? That's why I'm not interested in finding a girlfriend. I'm a dirty, sloppy, fat, disgusting piece of shit, okay? But he still took pride in his work. He would say, I really enjoy destroying these cockroaches. It's a pleasure for me. That and the fact that he had access to a lot of harsh chemicals because of his job. He would say things like, I have access to many potentially catastrophic chemicals, and that's my advantage because anybody can have guns. Chemicals? People need access and knowledge, and I do. Which, to be fair, maybe he's just dealing with the trauma of having his dreams go down the drain, and this is his way of boosting his ego. I mean, I think it's terrifying, but I think a lot of his friends tried to be understanding about it. That's what his brother George and his friend Ralph thought. Other than these little outbursts at work, though, about how everybody is just cockroaches, other than that, Ricardo was typically okay most of the time. When he wasn't ranting about people calling him the Roach Man, he would have small, odd moments, but they were really small. So one time he was sitting with his friend, Ralph, at dinner, and the two of them are so close that silences throughout the dinner, no big deal. They're sitting in silence, enjoying each other's company until Ricardo suddenly breaks the silence. What if you saw your ex-girlfriend working at a strip club? What? Just imagine her stripping down in front of everyone. The two start debating what they would do in that situation. And I guess the primary reaction would be shock, right? There's another moment of silence before Ricardo comments. Just because you kill somebody doesn't mean that you don't love them anymore.
This is what the friend shared?
He shared it in his video diaries.
Oh.
I told him, just because you kill somebody doesn't mean you don't love them. And he goes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, just because you kill somebody doesn't mean you don't love them. So I didn't expect that, but that's interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, Ricardo has these little quirks here and there. I mean, like a few years ago, there was another incident. Ricardo's family had walked into his room, and it was pretty terrifying. I mean, but also potentially amusing if they thought this was some sort of like YouTube prank. Starting from the top where the ceiling begins, all the way down to the floor, every single inch of every single wall is covered in the same face, a picture of the same face. Ricardo had taken a picture of one person and taped it all over his walls.
Like those YouTube pranks.
Exactly. But it wasn't a prank. I mean, what the hell? Like, what's going on? Is this the celebrity that he won't stop talking about nonstop? The one that he purchased all those magazines about? Is that the one? The CDs? Like, why is he obsessed with her? Ricardo would come home and try to convince them it's for an art project. It's supposed to be like creative expression. But the family would never forget because it was just so strange. Ricardo would later say this was his attempt to get rid of his obsession. I mean, think about it. If you're obsessed with somebody, if you're obsessed over a famous celebrity, how are you going to move on? How are you going to continue in reality? If you think that you have a chance at dating them and your whole life is being held back, how do you move on? He has to break the fantasy. He said, F it. I was going to desensitize myself. I had hundreds of photographs of her face all over my walls and everything. That way I would get sick and tired of looking at her face, and it would lose that magicalness. That was a big step for me. But clearly, it didn't work. That's not what happened. Because the police are now sorting through 20 hours of footage left behind. They're learning about his plan to send his obsession an HIV-infused bomb, and they just need answers because this case is going to blow up internationally. They need to figure out what to tell the public. Did he send other bombs? Is this a case of a deranged stalker? Did he stalk any other celebrities too? Are there other crimes that he might have committed? And why Björk? Why this celebrity? The tapes are only from Ricardo's perspective of things, and how much can they trust? From records, they can see that Ricardo Lopez was born in Uruguay before immigrating to the U.S. as a kid. He first moved to Georgia, that's where he was raised, then to Hollywood, Florida.
Georgia?
Yeah.
He was here.
Yeah. But that doesn't tell them too much. I mean, the authorities, they reach out to people who would have known Ricardo when he was a kid, and they want to know because sometimes those with obsessive personalities, to the point that they become violent towards their obsessions, there might be signs when they're young. There might be little clues. Everyone who knew Ricardo was very confused on how to answer the question. I mean, he was close with his family. There was nothing to indicate that something was wrong. I mean, unless you consider being very shy a crime. He's just one of those kids that didn't make a lot of friends. He liked to keep his circle small. He was an introvert. Very big introvert, actually. I mean, even now, he probably only had like one guy friend, two guy friends.
When was this happening?
96.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ralph being one of his best friends. But you know what? Now that they're all thinking about it, he did have this thing where he was terrified of talking to girls. Like, terrified. But everybody just thought, I mean, he's super shy. He was extremely intelligent, though, so he just maybe not interested in dating? He did have this fantasy, though, that he would become this world-renowned artist, and that would occupy his mind since childhood. But he didn't become one, right? Well, he never applied to any schools. He was too terrified of rejection, so he just wouldn't apply. He did have this small thing, though, where he would sometimes get fixated on certain movies or certain actresses. Like one time he was watching Thelma and Louise, and he knew every line to that movie. Same with Beetlejuice. His favorite was this actress named Gina Davis. It's almost like he watched anything that she was in. I mean, anything for her, he would watch it, he would buy it. He knew everything about her. He could recite any line that she had in any show or movie, even if she was just like making a cameo and had one line in a show. He would know that line, and he would know the timestamp of when she comes on. which sounds a little bit alarming, but one day he went to go buy a magazine with her on the cover, and he realized that Geena Davis is now in a public relationship with fellow actor Jeff Goldblum. He was devastated. You would almost think that Geena Davis was cheating on him, that they were in a relationship or something, which is alarming, but he got over it, which is probably why his friends and family didn't think anything crazy about it. It's not that alarming. I mean, eventually he gets over it, so what's the matter, right? So why didn't he get over Björk? Why go so extreme? If you guys don't know, Björk is an Icelandic musician, and she is honestly, I don't know how to describe her music. I went onto Reddit. People describe her music style as unconventional, avant-garde, very diverse and eclectic, one of a kind, full of emotion. I mean, just very experimental. One person writes, it's a very emotional experience from a sonic form. Initially, it causes much confusion and incredulous looks at first, and then it just creeps up on you until you are utterly and hopelessly in love with her music. I've never listened to her music prior to the research of this case. I might start after. I mean, not that she needs my streams or anything. She's massive. She is one of the biggest names in music, to the point where a lot of other experimental artists, they all get compared to her. So for example, Grimes, she doesn't like being compared to Björk. She loves Björk, but she just gets annoyed that all experimental musicians get compared to Björk, especially if they're a girl or if they identify as a woman, right? But that's how big she is. If you're in the experimental music world, everybody's getting compared to Björk. And that's the highest compliment you could probably get. She was one of the biggest names in the industry. She's actually a very fascinating character. Her first album, which was an album full of covers of other artists' music, was released when she was 11. She just did it for fun. It wasn't a serious debut, but she still ended up selling 7,000 copies, which is kind of wild. And she has this very fascinating background, which probably contributes to the way that she makes her music. Her dad is this super conservative leader of the union type of figure, like the labor union. Her mom is an activist that everybody said kind of lived more of a commune lifestyle. They called her a hippie. Her parents are divorced, by the way, so she grows up between going to her dad's house, which is super rigid, very rule-oriented home, to her mom's free-spirited, everybody gets to do what they want. There's 8 adults living in that one house. Even the kids, the type of environment, just back and forth, back and forth. It's a very complicated background. Björk said that she loved and hated the experience of being so free on her mom's side. She said, can you imagine being brought up by 7 grown-ups who all hate work and all they want to do is play games all day and tell you 4-hour-long stories and make kites?
She said she loved and hated.
Yes, she loved it and grew to resentment because when you're a child, you want order and authority at points. She said the house was painted purple, so... yeah. Later in Björk's musical career, she becomes very experimental. Apparently one time she wanted the acoustics of a song to sound a very specific way. So she went ahead and starts recording in a bat-infested cave in the Bahamas. She went to a cave and starts recording in there. She wants to be in very particular environments that embodies the type of music that she's trying to make. She once said in an interview, a lot of what I was doing before was to please other people. It had been my biggest fear since I was 11 to be in the spotlight. In the band that I was in Iceland, I even tried to look as ugly as possible so that people would listen to the music, but not look at me. Being a woman gets in the way. If people see me as a object, it is their problem. And yet, there was this very, very big problem. A fan from Florida had become so obsessed with Björk, with her music, that he planned on grooming her. This is so complicated. Let me explain. Ricardo Lopez is 21 years old when he starts taping his video diaries. Björk is 31 years old. So how would he groom her? I mean, that term specifically refers to the manipulation of someone far younger than you, typically underage. But Ricardo has a plan. His plan is to time travel. The ultimate fantasy. What? In his video diaries, he describes his plans way better than I can because they're so unhinged. But he states he wants to go back in time and meet Björk when she's a little child. Why?
To be the single most important influence on her life.
What does that mean? Help her develop that attachment for me. I go back and I become the single most important person in Iceland for the fact that, imagine a traveler from the future that comes with news from the future, and I came to Iceland exclusively to see her, you know? Besides, going to the past is simple compared to going to the future. The future is, well, Cryonics, the art of freezing people, right? That sounds crazy, but there's a corporation in California that freezes the rich and famous. They'll freeze your whole body, pump out all the water in your body, and then they inject like a gelatin into you, put a different cocktail of drugs into you to help your cells avoid freezing. And it goes into detail, and I can talk about it later if I want. But the thing is, they freeze your body for the future. They just don't have the technology today to resuscitate you. But they will soon. So this is the plan. You get frozen, and then 150 years later, 250 years in the future, you wake up and they have a time machine type thing that's already built. Well, that's the fantasy, right? The plan was to freeze himself, wake up in a time machine, right? Then go back to the past to be the single most biggest influence on Björk's life. He says, me being there in her reproductive years or young, flowering years, looking up to me, you can change people at an early age, but not when they're much older. The earlier, the younger you are, the more vulnerable, okay? Especially a young girl. Their minds are very vulnerable. Ready for information? That's how minds work.
That's how minds work, and the younger you are, the more susceptible it is to a person with a plan, sort of like to, not to abuse it, but to mold it,
I want to get her to be interested in me, man, who the hell is this guy? If I go back in time, change her life completely, and she decides to stay in Iceland and she pursues, her career, of course, but like in a different, completely different fashion, this and that, and maybe she's not famous, okay? Either way, the plan is go back in time with the knowledge that I have now and just bring her the utmost pleasure, She's never had any experience if I meet her when she's that young. And imagine what that could be for your first experience, for hours. He talks about performing oral. Yeah.
First of all, is he being serious or is he just talking out of thin air right now?
It seems like this was his ultimate fantasy, but he realizes it's not going to work. He doesn't have the money to get frozen. He doesn't know if this is a surefire plan, so he's just going to kill her instead. But this is his ultimate fantasy, if he could make anything work.
Wow. Okay, so his ultimate plan is go to this company, get frozen, wake up 50 years, 100 years later.
Next to Walt Disney.
Next to Walt Disney?
Who is allegedly frozen, yes.
Oh, okay. And there will be a time machine built from the future, and then you jump in there and travel all the way back.
Yes.
To groom her.
Yes.
Wow.
And I don't know where in the timeline this is, but he talks about being her very first and how he will go down. And he would say things like,
make yourself comfortable, get a pillow, and say, baby, I'm going to be here a while. So don't have any anxieties about me quitting, right when you're getting started or before you finish, because I'm going to be here a while.
Boom. I would probably have her sit on the washing machine or something like that because, the vibrations during the spin cycle, anything that would help. And then I would just calm down that beast, her sexual desires. And then she would be happy and I would make her laugh and feel great. She would be happy with me. For some reason, oh man, I saw how amazing it was to, when men go down there on women. Again, I don't know where in the timeline this is. I mean, either way, it's very alarming, disturbing, and jail. But he continues. I even blush from the results from guys doing that to girls. It's overwhelming. Man, you can make a girl feel like that. Wow, that's truly